Hi, I'm the Space Quest historian. Let's talk Space Quest 4. Well, what's to say? Space Quest 4 is one of the most gorgeous, fantastic adventure games I have ever played. It is amazing from start to finish. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, especially not if you're used to a modern day adventure game that will, let's say, not outright hate you as a human being. But if you are into the sort of humor where you will find amusement at the realization that the universe is a cruel and uncaring place that wants you dead, then Space Quest 4 is right up your alley. And my god, once you're on board with that idea, Space Quest 4 just transcends art. It is a fucking masterpiece, and I love it to dear sweet death. It is by far one of my all-time favorite adventure games ever. So for this video, talking about Space Quest on other systems, I will demonstrate to you how to take said masterpiece and absolutely fucking violate it. I will show you in this video the worst version of Space Quest 4 you have ever fucking seen. So here we go. I'll bet you can't guess. I'll bet you can't guess which version I'm talking about. No, wait, what you just guessed is wrong. Is absolutely wrong. Let's just get into it. Let's see the Amiga version. Okay, here we go. Loading. We've got a nice little green tinted cursor going on. I can't wait. This is going to be what is this now? Well, you know what? This is actually my fault. This is what happens when you start messing with emulators. This is what happens when you give the Amiga the wrong kickstart. Hang on. Okay, we are on the move. Things have been corrected, and we are going. Okay, we just gotta insert the first disk. Yes, we are running this off the floppy drive. I know the Amiga had a hard drive, but I thought we want to get the, the authentic experience. We want to see how it was to play this game from the. I'm just going to go ahead and have a wild guess. 14 to 16 floppy disks that this game came on. I honestly don't know. But anyway, here we go. We're into the game, and what is this shit? You have got to be fucking kidding me. They did not. I was expecting 32 color graphics, which is what we're getting, obviously. That's what the Amiga could do. And look, I wasn't expecting any color cycling. I was expecting long load times. I wasn't going to make any stupid cracks like I did with the Atari ST in the previous episode on Space Quest 3. I wasn't going to do any of that. I was going to give this one a fair shot because by 1991, the Commodore Amiga 500 was on its last legs. I mean, this is like the technological pinnacle of current edge, cutting edge computer technology. Space Quest 4 was a monster, was a trailblazer. It was top of the line, and to expect an Amiga 500 to cope with that sort of awesomeness is just, well, it is just poppycock. But the fucking chiptune music? Are you kidding me? Is this really? This cannot be right. This cannot and will not stand. I think I'm just gonna stop messing with Amiga emulators. We're just gonna have to call in some expert help. So I'm just gonna turn this over to Pickle Dog from the SQH Discord, who has a much better grasp of this shit. Because I cannot. Are we still on the title screen? Is this really? Are we really? I'm gonna turn this over to Pickle Dog now. Fuck this.
Well, thank you, Space Quest historian. Well, let's fire up this emulated Amiga. And let me tell you, getting this thing to run was a pain in the arse. So it doesn't really run on what a lot of people would consider an Amiga to be. That would be an Amiga 500. Now it runs on a 500, but let's just say you don't want to run it on a 500. It takes more than half an hour just to get through the intro.
He's not kidding. I have the footage to prove it.
So we'll be running it on the biggest, baddest Amiga you could buy in 1991. An Amiga 3000 with the 25MHz 68030 processor. We have installed the game to the 3000's hard drive, which is essential to not going insane, and we have given it 10 megs of RAM because it seems with RAM, the more you have, the faster this game goes. Indeed, if you have only 1 meg of RAM, the game doesn't have any proper music, or sound effects for that matter.
Aha! This is why I was stuck in shitty chiptuneville.
And lastly, we are emulating a US Amiga, an NTSC model. This is quite unusual for Amiga gaming. In fact, most Amiga games target the Power Amiga and don't work properly on the American ones. The game runs more than twice as fast. I've never seen anything like it.
And this also explains why Space Quest 3 sounded like it had taken a Valium. In the last episode, I played you bits of the Space Quest 3 intro on the Amiga, and it just sounded slowed down, and everything was running sort of slower, and that's because Sierra just looked at Space Quest 3, it's an American game, we're going to develop this for the American Amiga, the NTSC Amiga. Even though very few Americans bought Amigas, it was way more popular in Europe than it was in the US, and Sierra didn't test it on PAL, just on the European PAL systems. So boom, we just got slowed the fuck down over here.
And here we have the Paula chip doing her best impression of the MT32. It's not bad, all things considered. I mean, it's not good, but considering how Sierra development worked, that is, all versions of games were expected to share the same resource files as closely as possible, with all differences handled by the drivers, it's doing a pretty damn good job of emulating MT32-like music using the same base MIDI score.
And yet, some poor fucker had to go into a mod tracker and recreate the soundtrack based off of that MIDI score, because while the PC and Macintosh versions could essentially take the same MIDI data and just output it through whatever sound card was in the computer, on the Macintosh it's built in. On the PC you would have anything from an ad-lib to a sound blaster to an MT32 to a sound canvas, whatever you had on PC. The same MIDI data is just basically being funneled through the sound card, and it's up to the sound card to reproduce the music in whatever sound font that sound card has on it, which is why the music sounds so radically different between sound cards on the PC. But on the Amiga, you've got the Paula chip. The Paula chip doesn't read MIDI data. Mod music is a weird beast. I'm not going to get into it super detailed here, but while it is, score data, as in you got 4 channels, and you basically just say, okay, play this instrument here at this pitch, for this long, that kind of thing. It's not the same as MIDI data. You can't import a MIDI file into a mod tracker and expect that to work, because what a MIDI file does is just basically tell the sound card, you have to play this note this long using your trumpet sound, go. While a mod music file says you have to play this note for this long with this sample that I've imported into you. Mod music files have the samples built into them, whereas the MIDI files are just data. It just shoots that data off to the sound card and expects the sound card to get on with it. So some poor fucker had to go in and recreate the soundtrack, probably based off the original MIDI score. I would imagine he just printed them out somehow and just recreated them note by note, but some poor fucker had to do that, and I pity him very much. But truth be told, I am just stalling for time because we are just about to shove Roger through this lovely 32-bit colored time warp. Oh my god, these downscaled graphics are just amazing.
No animation at all, how sad. Even sadder is that this would have been trivial to do using the Amiga's copper, that is the video coprocessor and the Agnes chip. The developers either didn't know the platform or just didn't care.
You know what? I'm gonna go with the didn't care. I am firmly in the they did not give a shit camp. Space Quest 4, around this time, 1991, Sierra were betting hard on the PC. The advancements in IBM PC and Macintosh, for that matter, were light years beyond what the 8-bit and 16-bit computers of the time, the home computers, your Commodore 64s, your Amigas, your STs, your whatever you've got, ColecoVisions, whatever. The PC was just light years ahead of this, and the PC was really starting to establish itself as a proper gaming platform. We are only 2 years away from having fucking Doom on DOS on the IBM PC. So by this point, Sierra did not give two flying fucks about the Amiga, and this is the best. The best demonstration of this really isn't just how badly Space Quest 4 is, programmed and presented and whatever on the Amiga. I mean, it looks absolutely horrendous. The music is horrendous, and according to Pickle Dog, it also plays pretty horrendously. It's slow, it's cumbersome, it behaves like total fucking ass, and it is because we're saving here. I would too, but the Amiga version is just terrible, and it's not just because Sierra didn't understand the platform. It is because they absolutely did not care, and the best example of that is actually the version of King's Quest VI, which I believe was the last Amiga version of a Sierra game that came out, and that one is absolutely beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. Say what you will about King's Quest. Obviously, it's a train wreck, but the version of King's Quest VI on the Amiga is absolutely wonderful. It runs smoothly, it looks great, and it wasn't done by Sierra at all. It was in fact done by Revolution Software. Yes, same Revolution Software that made Beneath the Steel Sky and Broken Sword. And it's not even running Sierra's SCI. Revolution just rebuilt all of King's Quest VI in Virtual Theater, in their own game engine, the same game engine that runs Beneath the Steel Sky and Lure of the Temptress and Broken Sword and all that shit. So Revolution Software knew the Amiga and cared for the Amiga, even in its twilight years. But Sierra, I mean, fucking look at this shit. This is just awful. These are just poorly downscaled bitmaps from the PC original. Just these washed down, turd colored, weird. It looks like someone smeared filth on your screen, and it plays about the same. So I would think this is the worst version of Space Quest 4. You'd actually be wrong. Welcome to Space Quest 4, the EGA version. The 16-color EGA version, by the way. You can tell because a lot of the graphics have actually been redrawn, especially for this version, in 16 colors. You couldn't just take the original VGA hand-painted backgrounds and just import them and downscale them into EGA. Oh, look at Smurf Roger here. Look at look at Blue Roger. He dabba da indeed. So they actually went in and redrew a lot of the graphics and touched it up. Some of it is downscaled. I mean, look at the weird dithering on the left side of the screen and stuff. But they tried. I mean, have a look at Roger here getting shoved through the time warp. Of course, you can't do color cycling in 16 colors. There aren't that many colors, so what they did instead was, well, they just didn't. The time warp is a cold and dark and scary place now, and Roger's facial expression actually seems a lot more appropriate, albeit less psychedelic than the original time warp. This is not the worst version of Space Quest 4. I mean, some actual effort went into this. Granted, not a lot, because by this point, Sierra were expecting people to have 256 color VGA graphics adapters. They were expecting them to have sound cards. You can play Space Quest 4 with the PC speaker, but it sounds... well, it's madness-inducing, really. And similarly, you could buy Space Quest 4 separately, I might add, as a 16-color EGA game. But Sierra weren't really banking on great profit returns of this version. They were really banking on selling the 256-color, trailblazing, souped-up, the massive version, the big version. And then, of course, a year later, the CD-ROM version comes out. CD-ROM being the newfangled technology, and Sierra were banking on you to pick that one up. Which, of course, you most certainly would have to, if for nothing else than for the majesty that is the narration of Gary Owens. May he rest in fucking peace. So, anyway, this is not the worst version of Space Quest 4 either. But what if I told you that a childhood memory of mine was that there was a different 16-color version of Space Quest 4? One that was just awful, just absolutely god-fucking awful. One that just simply took the VGA graphics and downscaled them into just pitiful 16-color nonsense. I mean, the Amiga version looked pretty bad, but this... Ladies and gentlemen, I give you pure fucking nightmare fuel. This is by far the worst you can do to an absolute masterpiece of a computer game. I mean, fucking look at this. Oh my god. And it doesn't get any better. Let's just fast forward to the actual game. Here we go. My god. Look at the fucking majesty of this shit. This is what happens if you tell the CD-ROM version of Space Quest 4 to run in 16 colors. And my childhood memory of this version was that I could pop in my Space Quest 4 collection CD and actually just, go into the install program and set it to 16 colors, and then this absolute monstrosity would unfold before my eyes. Turns out my childhood memory may have been a little faulty because I actually had to source two different Space Quest Collection original CD-ROMs for this, and also a original Space Quest 4 CD-ROM, just, the actual CD-ROM that came out in 1992. And none of those versions had EGA 16 colors in their installed.exe in their setup program. So my childhood memory was mistaken. However, it was possible to go into there's a subfolder on the original Space Quest collection and the silver box collection, and also in the original Space Quest 4 CD-ROM. There was a subfolder for the Imagination Network, or the Sierra Network, which is, long story short, it was this sort of online, or very, very early online meet friends and hang out sort of chat type thing, which looked and played like a Sierra game, but you're actually interacting with other people from around the world. By the way, if you're wondering what the hell I'm doing with the Buckazoid right now, I'm trying to trigger the Neil's Holiday Easter egg and failing absolutely spectacularly at it, and I will eventually give up and just go in through the sewer pipe. So don't mind that. Anyway, so the Imagination Network looks and plays like a Sierra game, like I said, and that had an EGA driver. And it had an EGA driver that you could essentially just pick up and put into the Space Quest 4 folder, then go into the setup program and set Space Quest 4 to use that EGA driver. And what would happen is this, what you're looking at right now. So this is actually doing something really, really awful. It is taking the original graphics from the 256 color VGA version, and it's running it at a resolution of 640 by 200. At least according to my friends on the SQH Discord. Feel free to let me know in the comments. But as far as we can tell, this is running in a 640 by 200, stretching that out, and just doing an automatic sort of downscale of the graphics and the colors. and doing an absolutely piss poor job of it. I think you'll agree. And mercifully, once you get to the landing bay and steal the time pod, the game just flat out crashes and will not recover from this error. So it is actually impossible to finish this god-awful version of Space Quest 4. And thank fuck for that. That's honestly the worst looking Space Quest 4 of all time. But actually, this whole running things in high resolution 16 color stuff is nothing new. Space Quest 5 does the same thing if you turn that into 16 colors. And also this Japanese version of Space Quest 4 runs in high resolution 16 colors because of the Japanese characters. Japanese is apparently totally illegible if you don't have a high resolution font for it, which actually isn't true, because even though the text boxes here have that high resolution font, some of the dialogue in the game is actually still in the 320 by 200 normal dialogue font. So I actually don't know why they did this. This is the PC 98 version, which was essentially a Japanese computer that ran DOS. But anyway, look at some of the graphics they redrew for the 16 color version. Look at the cyborg here. Poor cyborg needs to get out in the sun more often, doesn't he? And also the grating here that you're supposed to climb through to get into the sewer was redrawn for the 16 color version. By the way, this looks identical to the floppy EGA version that came out and there's the normal sized font. So apparently Japanese is legible in 320 by 200. They just wanted, I don't know. Anyway, if you're interested in more about the Japanese version, my friend Dark Soul from the SQH Discord actually did a full playthrough of the Japanese version, which I will put up on my channel at a later date. It's actually kind of interesting. So yeah, do check that out when it comes out. So I'll bet you're thinking, now we've seen the absolute worst that you could do with Space Quest 4. But hang on. Wasn't there a Macintosh version? Yes. Yes, there was. And it doesn't fucking work. So we can all go home. Video's over. Thank you so much for watching. And yeah, I know. I said in the previous episode that I have several Mac emulators installed. Yeah, we can try another one. Sure, we can. Okay, so this one actually works, but it doesn't have any sound. And apparently this is a fault with this particular emulator. Apparently, if you try and run games on it, they won't make a single peep. Plenty of system sounds. System sounds will play beautifully, but once you try and run games on it, it just stays absolutely silent. But as we can see, the Macintosh version looks pretty much the same as the PC version. This is the disk version. The credits go by pretty fast, which would lead me to assume that the same timer bugs that were in Space Quest 3 are also rearing their ugly head on the Macintosh version, but again, I'm not entirely sure if that's an emulator issue or not. This is a different emulator than the one I was playing Space Quest 3 on, as I believe I have just mentioned, and this one has timer issues as well, so I don't know how this ran on, the original hardware, but if it ran anything like this, then good fucking luck playing Space Quest 4, because Space Quest 4 has a lot of timer puzzles. Space Quest 4 is essentially Timer Puzzle, the game. So yeah, good fucking luck on that. You may be wondering why the game is running in this tiny, tiny little window. And yes, so was I. But there actually is, hang on. Okay, here we go, skipping ahead a little bit. There actually is a drop-down menu up here called Sierra, and when you click Expand Window, it's sort of full screens. It looks awful because it's essentially just stretching all the pixels and not doing anything spectacularly, anti-aliasing or anything of the sort with it. And it is also not stretching it to the correct aspect ratio. So everything just looks really, really awful. The 256 color graphics look pretty good. I would assume the sound is also pretty good, but look at the fucking text. The text is absolutely illegible. And you'll also notice I'm experimenting a bit with the speed slider. I just did anyway. When you mess with the speed slider in the original DOS floppy version, and also to some extent the CD version, it only controls the speed at which Roger moves. Timer events operate on an entirely different, set of instructions. Famously, the CD-ROM version of Space Quest 4 for DOS was broken in that the timer was now dependent on the speed of the computer. So the faster computer you had, the more infuriating the timer puzzles were, because the less time you would have, and it actually rendered some of the puzzles impossible to complete. But on this Macintosh version, it seems like the speed slider actually controls everything that happens in the game. So once again, if you turn the speed up, then everything around Roger also has the speed cranked up, including the timer. But I do manage to make my way to the supercomputer, and oh, by the way, watch the text just zip by when the secret policeman gets out and talks to the other secret policeman. Whoop, better get to that hand icon, better jump in the time pod and get the fuck out of here. And oh, that's right, we're playing the disc version. Never mind. I think we've had our fill with Space Quest 4 anyway. It is an absolute fucking masterpiece. And, well, if you are playing the IBM PC version, that is. If you're playing it on the Amiga or Macintosh, or if you, for some reason, like me, copied the wrong EGA graphics driver into it, and then you might have a slightly worse time. But Space Quest 4 is a fantastic game, and I think you should all play it on the IBM PC or through ScumVM, and definitely not any of the versions I've just shown you. So thank you. I won't be doing an episode on Space Quest 5 or Space Quest 6 because there aren't really any different versions of those games. So thank you for tuning into this series of Space Quest on other platforms. And I'll see you around the Chrono Stream.